Hey, this is Joe from Home Studio Corner. I got another listening experiment for you. So clean out your ears, put in your headphones, listen in your studio, do whatever you got to do. But you might be able to hear the difference just on your phone. Here's what's going down. I've recently recorded drums and bass for a song. More on that later. I'm going to play for you the drums and the bass, and I want you to listen specifically to the bass and take note of what you hear. That's all I'm going to say. If you want to, leave a comment with your thoughts on the bass. Then, when it's done playing drums and bass, I'll play it again, just the bass. And I want you to note the differences. Maybe start your comment and say, here's what I hear, drums and bass. Bass by itself, here's what I hear. And I'm curious if those two things are different for you. Then I'll come back and tell you what point I'm trying to make, because obviously there's a point. Okay? Here we go. Here's the listen. Here's the big message. Clean bass sucks. Here's what I mean. There are times when it makes sense to have a clean bass tone, but for the majority of the music that I work on, whether it's straight rock stuff like this, even country to indie stuff, if there is a bass guitar, 9 times out of 10, I want that bass guitar to have some grit on it. Why is that? Well, I'm guessing if you scroll down and look through the comments, if people were honest, they probably didn't say a whole lot, unless maybe they're bass players, a whole lot about how the bass had this grit on it. They maybe talked about the low end on the bass, because this is just unmixed, or maybe the percussiveness of the tick, 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 tick sound, or any number of things. But I bet most people didn't say, oh man, it's got this grit to it. But then, when you listen to the bass by itself, the first thing you notice is this buzz, this almost sounds a little bit broken, and I love it. I love that. Why do I love it? A, it sounds like rock and roll to me. B, it helps the bass cut through. So you were hearing, believe it or not, both listening tests, you were hearing the same bass. I didn't change the bass, I just added drums to it, and your ears filled in the blanks, meaning those upper buzzy frequencies of the bass were still there. You didn't hear them necessarily as buzz, but they helped you hear what the bass was playing. On this particular song, when it gets into the second half of this bridge, and he's doing that crazy run, there's going to be a bunch of guitars and vocals there, and it's going to be huge. But the bass, even just by itself with no mixing, is going to cut through because it sounds like this. It's got just a little buzz to push it over the top. I first learned this years ago from a prominent Nashville producer who said everybody in Nashville, even on country music, we're talking like 90s country music, they always run the bass through something like a Sans amp pedal, something like that, or add distortion later in the software to give it some grit for this very reason. If you have trouble getting your bass to cut through, it's just a big mess of low end and there's no character, and no matter what you do with EQ, boosts, or cuts, it just seems to be a big blob of blah down in the low end, this might be the secret. Now, how do you go about doing this? Well, one way is to do it at the source. When my brother-in-law Joel came over to play bass, he brought his amp and his pedal board. We drove in a little bit of crunchiness on the amp, but then he also had an Ampeg pedal that dialed in a little bit more grit. Now, we started off with too much grit and we dialed it back to what you hear in the recording. And it sounded awesome in the room, sounded awesome on the recording, but most importantly, sounded cool against the drums that we had recorded. Now, if you don't have a pedal or an amp and you don't have the options to do that, there are plenty of ways to do that digitally. If I don't have that available, I'll have the bass player just play direct, and then I'll add something like red light distortion, or maybe one of the amp models inside of Ampire, or any number of things to add some grit to the bass. And it does wonders. So as you know, I'm Mr. Get It Right at the source, so I like to do it this way, where I bake the sound right in. But if you were to hire me to mix a song and you sent me a super clean, boring bass part, guess what? I'm going to jack that stuff up and make it buzzy and gross, and it's going to make the mix sound amazing. And I think you should do it too. All right, speaking of this drums and bass, this is a part of a secret project I've been working on for months now. Months. And it's almost to fruition. Mark your calendars, June 1st, I'm going to be releasing a brand new all-inclusive recording course. We're going to cover everything from how to do a great, simple guitar vocal to big, huge productions like this and everything in between. I've been working my butt off for at least 6 months to make this happen, and it's almost here. If you want to be one of the first to know when this course is available, go to recordingcheatsheet.com. You'll get a free PDF that has a lot of recording tricks on it, and that'll get you on the email list, and I'll let you know when the course is ready and you can sign up. All right, that's it for me. Thanks for watching. See ya.